Welcome to the Veil of Truth, your gateway to uncovering hidden insights and illuminating mysteries. I'm thrilled you've joined our global community. Whether you're watching from a bustling city skyline or a quiet countryside, we're glad you're here. Globe showing Europe, Africa, so tell me, where are you tuning in from today? Chapter 1, The Summons to Ravenshade Manor. It was on an unusually mild October morning that Hercule Poirot, seated in his perfectly ordered flat on Whitehaven Mansions, received the letter that was to lead him into one of the most singular cases of his career. The breakfast table before him was a picture of precision, a silver coffee pot gleaming like a mirror, a plate with exactly 2 croissants arranged at right angles, and a single vase holding a yellow chrysanthemum. Captain Hastings, sitting opposite, was glancing idly through the Times, muttering about the cricket scores. Poirot's immaculate fingers slit open the pale blue envelope that bore an unfamiliar crest, an intertwined D's and M's surrounded by a wreath of ivy leaves. The handwriting within was elegant, but the lines trembled, as though written under strain. He read it once, then again more slowly, his brows rising ever so slightly. Monsieur Poirot. A dreadful event has occurred at Ravenshade Manor. The Sapphire of Dusk, my family's most precious heirloom, has vanished in a manner both impossible and terrifying. I entreat you, in all humility, to come at once. Yours in desperation, Lady Cecilia Marston. He folded the letter carefully, set it beside his coffee, and leaned back with that curious stillness which always preceded the quick, bird-like energy that followed his decisions. My friend, he said, looking across at Hastings, it appears we have before us an affair of theft, but with the savour of the impossible. A jewel that disappears in full view, a lady in despair, and the English countryside in autumn. Could one wish for more? Hastings gave a half smile. You do make it sound enticing, Poirot. Though I dare say it will turn out to be something simple, a servant with sticky fingers, most likely. Poirot wagged a reproving finger. Ah, Hastings, how you leap to conclusions. A servant, yes, perhaps, but she does not write in blue ink upon handmade paper with the crest of her ancestors. Non. This is not the crime of the gutter, but of society. He rose, brushed a non-existent speck from his lapel, and straightened his tie with delicate care. Order and method, Hastings. The great crimes, they are committed with polish, with a touch of the dramatic. We shall go to Hampshire at once. Hastings sighed, setting down his newspaper. Very well, Poirot. I suppose the countryside will do us both good. The train to Hampshire glided through a world of fading gold. Fields lay quiet beneath soft mists, and the trees, half-turned, whispered in russet and brown. Poirot, seated opposite his friend, watched the scenery with an expression of deep satisfaction. His patent leather shoes gleamed even in the dull carriage light, his gloves, folded precisely on his knee, betrayed no wrinkle. Ravenshade Manor, he mused aloud. A name most English, most respectable. Tell me, Hastings, do you not find it curious how it is always in such houses, the great, peaceful estates, that tragedy chooses to arrive? Hastings smiled. Perhaps because there's more worth stealing in them. Poirot chuckled softly. Ah, you think of value in pound sterling. I think rather of emotions. In such houses dwell pride, jealousy, resentment, the dust of generations. The Sapphire of Dusk, you see, may be but a stone, yet around it cling histories, ambitions, even madness. When they alighted at the small station of Ravenshade Hall, a motorcar awaited them, a stately black Daimler bearing the same crest as the letter. The chauffeur, a grave man in grey livery, saluted and drove them through winding lanes flanked by oak and beech, the wheels crunching upon gravel as they ascended towards a broad plateau. Ravenshade Manor appeared at last, a vast Georgian house of mellow stone, its facade dignified but cold. Smoke drifted from twin chimneys into the still air, and the long windows caught the fading light like solemn eyes. Lady Cecilia Marston met them in the great hall, tall, elegant, perhaps in her early 40s. There was grace in her bearing, but also strain. Her face was pale, her eyes haunted. She extended a trembling hand. "Monsieur Poirot, thank heaven you have come." "I am beside myself." Poirot bowed, his expression gentle. "Madam, you have done well to send for me. You will permit me, perhaps, to sit and to hear the facts from the beginning." She led them into the drawing room, a long chamber with high ceilings, heavy curtains, and the faint, melancholy scent of old roses. On a side table stood an empty glass case, its velvet lining a deep midnight blue. Hastings noticed at once that the case was unbroken, its lock gleaming untouched. Lady Cecilia's voice quivered. "That, Monsieur Poirot, was where the Sapphire of Dusk was displayed during my charity dinner. It was my husband's wish, he thought it might amuse our guests. We had no idea it would end like this." "Please describe precisely what occurred," said Poirot quietly. "It was near the end of the evening," she began. "The guests were admiring the stone. I remember the light, it seemed to glow more vividly than ever. I turned for a moment, only to lift my glass and speak a few words, and when I turned back, it was gone. Just gone. The case was still locked, the glass unbroken. Everyone swore they had seen no one near it." Hastings frowned. "Was there any sign of tampering?" "None at all. Even the butler examined it at once. Nothing was disturbed. It was as if the sapphire had simply vanished into the air." Poirot bent over the case, studying it with minute attention. He touched nothing, yet his eyes missed no detail. Then he straightened slowly. "And the guests, madam?" "They were." She hesitated, glancing toward the door as though fearing eavesdroppers. "There were only 5 besides ourselves. Sir Giles, my husband, of course. Dr. Felix Gray, our physician. Miss Arabella Fenn, a portrait artist. Reverend Collins, a family friend. And Mrs. Benson, our housekeeper, who oversaw the arrangements. That is all." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "A small circle, excellent. The fewer the persons, the more delicate the pattern. Tell me, Lady Cecilia, what do you know of the sapphire's history?" She managed a wan smile. "It has belonged to my family for generations. It was said to be cut from a stone found in India during the Raj, that Sapphire of Dusk, so called because it glows like the sky at twilight. My grandmother believed it unlucky. My husband did not. And now," said Poirot softly, "it brings misfortune indeed." For a moment, silence filled the room, heavy, uneasy. From somewhere far off came the toll of a clock striking 4. Poirot looked around the room once more, his eyes pausing on a tall mirror behind the table. He observed the angle, the reflection of the window, the line of the candles. Then he smiled faintly. "A mirror," he murmured. "Yes, that is interesting. The glass that deceives the eye, perhaps, Lady Cecilia, it was not the case that was at fault, but the vision of those who looked." She blinked, bewildered. I do not understand." Poirot bowed slightly. "You will, madam. I promise you that. For now, let us be patient. The truth, it hides, but never forever." As they left the drawing room, Hastings whispered, "Well, Poirot, what do you make of it?" Poirot smiled, eyes twinkling. "A jewel that vanishes before witnesses. A mirror that sees more than the eye. And a lady who trembles too much for guilt. Yes, Hastings, this will be a most enchanting little puzzle." And somewhere in the great, echoing house, a door closed softly, as though someone had been listening all along. Chapter 2, The Sapphire and its Shadow. The following morning dawned pale and misty over Davenridge Manor. The house lay silent beneath a heavy sky, its chimneys breathing faint curls of smoke into the chill air. To Hastings, the place seemed to wear its troubles visibly, as though the theft itself had cast a shadow upon the very walls. Poirot, however, appeared invigorated. After a breakfast of toast, marmalade, and strong coffee arranged with his customary precision, he announced, "Today, mon ami, we begin the study of the scene, the people, and the psychology. For me, these three are like the points of a perfect triangle. Without one, there is imbalance." Hastings, buttoning his coat, chuckled. "You sound like a geometry teacher, Poirot." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Mais oui, and in crime, as in mathematics, one must prove every angle." They found Lady Cecilia in her morning room, her composure restored but her eyes still haunted. She had spent a sleepless night. "I keep thinking," she said softly, "that I might wake and find it all a dream, that the sapphire is back in its place, gleaming as it always did." Poirot inclined his head sympathetically. "It is natural, madam. Such treasures are not merely of gold and gem, they hold the memories of generations. But courage! We shall find it. And when we do, perhaps you will sleep again." She managed a faint smile. "I pray so, Monsieur Poirot. The police from the village came last night, but they are quite at a loss. They kept asking if I had dropped it myself. As if one could misplace a sapphire the size of a walnut." "Indeed," said Poirot dryly. "And what of your guests, madam?" "They remain at Davenridge still." "Yes, all except Reverend Collins. He had to return to his parish but promised to make himself available if needed. The others have kindly stayed, at my request." "Excellent," murmured Poirot. "Then I may make their acquaintance one by one." They began with Sir Giles Marston, Lady Cecilia's husband. He received them in the library, a handsome man of about 50, ruddy-faced, and impatient by nature. A half-burnt cigar rested in a tray beside him, filling the room with a thick, bitter haze. "Ghastly business, this," he said, pacing. "I told Cecilia she should never have displayed that wretched stone. Vanity, pure vanity. The thing's cursed, I tell you." "You believe in curses, monsieur?" asked Poirot mildly. Sir Giles snorted. "I believe in bad luck, and we've had plenty. The mine's failing, the debt's mounting, the horse breaking its leg just before the Derby. If that's not a curse, I don't know what is." Hastings raised an eyebrow. "Debts, you say?" Sir Giles turned sharply. "A temporary inconvenience. Every gentleman owes a bit now and again. It's the way of things." Poirot watched him closely. "And yet, monsieur, I imagine the Sapphire of Dusk was insured." Sir Giles's lips tightened. "Naturally. For £20,000. "Ah," said Poirot softly. "That is a great deal of money, but not so much as pride, perhaps." The Englishman frowned. "I don't take your meaning." "No matter," said Poirot pleasantly. "You will forgive me, I like to arrange my thoughts before I speak too freely." Sir Giles gave a shrug. "Well, good luck to you, Monsieur Poirot. If you can find the blasted stone, you'll be doing us all a favour." Their next visit was to Miss Arabella Fenn, the artist. Her studio occupied a sunny corner of the west wing, its walls hung with portraits in various stages of completion. Canvases leaned against every surface, and the air smelled of turpentine and linseed oil. Miss Fenn herself was tall and striking, with a cascade of auburn hair tied carelessly at her neck. Her fingers were stained with blue and green paint, and her eyes, keen and restless, missed little. "You must think me dreadfully morbid, keeping a studio in this house after such a shock," she said, setting down a brush. "But painting helps me think." "Ah, the creative mind," said Poirot approvingly. "It observes all, and forgets nothing. Perhaps you can tell us, mademoiselle, what you observed that evening." She paused, searching her memory. It was all very ordinary, until it wasn't. Lady Cecilia had just made her little speech about charity and beauty and the endurance of family treasures. The sapphire looked magnificent in the candlelight, almost alive. I remember glancing at the mirror behind it and seeing the reflection, a strange blue glimmer. And then, she shuddered slightly. It was gone. You saw nothing move? No hand, no shadow. Nothing. Only the reflection changed. One moment it gleamed, the next, emptiness. Poirot's gaze shifted to an easel nearby, upon which rested a half-finished portrait. It was unmistakably Lady Cecilia, and at her throat shone the same sapphire, painted in exquisite detail. You paint the lady as she was that night? Miss Fenn nodded. Yes. It's rather haunting now, to look at it. That stone, I must have studied it for hours to capture the hue properly. Poirot leaned closer, his nose almost touching the paint. A remarkable blue. One almost feels it could glow in the dark. She laughed softly. You have the soul of a poet, Monsieur Poirot. And you, mademoiselle, he said gravely, have the eye of a magician. Their third interview was with Dr. Felix Gray, the family physician. A man in his 30s, clean-shaven and quietly spoken, he greeted them in the study, his manner polite but distracted. Poirot at once noticed the faint scent that clung to him, sandalwood, subtle but persistent. You were present during the dinner, I believe, asked Poirot. And I had to fetch it from the cellar. When I came back, they were all seated. Merci, madame, said Poirot gently. You have been most helpful. As they stepped out into the corridor, the late afternoon light slanted through the windows, setting dust motes adrift like golden sparks. Hastings broke the silence first. Well, Poirot, what do you think? They all seemed decent enough. Poirot clasped his hands behind his back, gazing down the long, shadowed hall. Ah, my dear Hastings, you look with the eyes of the heart. I look with the eyes of the mind. One of them lies, but how and why, that is still hidden. He turned toward the drawing room, where the empty glass case awaited like a ghost. There is a shadow upon this house, he said softly. The shadow of the sapphire, and the mind that desired it. And as he spoke, the fading sun caught the mirror behind the case, sending a single ray of blue light flickering across the room, like the echo of something lost but not forgotten. Chapter 3, A Whiff of Smoke and a Whisper. The morning after their interviews dawned grey and windless, a strange hush hanging over Davenridge Manor as though the house itself listened for news of its lost treasure. Even the servants, Hastings noticed, spoke in lowered voices, as though fearful that sound might disturb some invisible presence. Hercule Poirot appeared undisturbed by the gloomy air. He sat at the breakfast table, trimming his toast with mathematical precision and stirring his coffee exactly 3 times clockwise before sipping. Hastings, reading the Daily Mail, could not help remarking, "You know, Poirot, if someone stole my sapphire in front of a room full of people, I should probably be tearing the place apart by now." Poirot raised an eyebrow. "Ah, but that is because you are English, mon ami, you believe that action is the cure for mystery. Moi, I prefer reflection. The mind, it must be as a pond, still enough that the smallest ripple may be seen." He finished his coffee and rose. "Today, Hastings, we reconstruct. We shall see the theft exactly as it occurred. The scene, it must speak to me." Lady Cecilia was waiting in the drawing room, looking pale but composed. "If you believe it will help, Monsieur Poirot, I shall arrange everything as it was that evening." "Excellent, madam." The precise arrangement, the candles, the guests, even the light, all these things are most important. The staff obeyed her quiet instructions. Candles were placed upon the mantel and table, the curtains drawn halfway to recreate the soft dusk of the dinner hour. The empty glass case stood in its place of honor upon a small oak table near the tall mirror. Hastings, notebook in hand, surveyed the setting with interest. "It's a gloomy room," he remarked. "The mirror makes it feel as if there were two of everything." Poirot glanced toward the mirror. "Just so, Hastings. Two of everything, and perhaps, for a moment, two sapphires." Lady Cecilia gestured to where the guests had been seated. Sir Giles stood by the fireplace, Miss Fenn beside the window, and Dr. Gray was here and near the case. "I was facing the room when I made my little speech. I recall that the sapphire seemed almost to shimmer. Then I turned to lift my glass, just for a second, and when I turned back, it had vanished." Poirot stood before the case, his eyes half closed. "You say it shimmered, madam. Tell me, did the light change?" "I suppose it did. A candle flickered, perhaps. Someone may have shifted in their seat." "Ah," murmured Poirot, "and the sapphire, it seemed to fade, yes." "Yes. It was like a light being snuffed out." Poirot opened his eyes. "Très bien. And afterwards? What of the case?" "It was locked still," she said, with a helpless gesture. "Not even a scratch." Dr. Gray examined it. He said the mechanism was untouched. Poirot stooped slightly, his nose mere inches from the lock. Hastings could see his lips move silently as though he were counting. After a long moment, Poirot straightened, sniffing the air. "Do you perceive it, Hastings?" "Something faint but distinct, the scent of sandalwood." Hastings sniffed obediently. "Now you mention it, yes. Though it might be from one of Lady Cecilia's perfumes." Lady Cecilia shook her head. "I use rose, never sandalwood." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Interesting. The scent clings to the lock, not the air. It suggests that whoever touched the case left more than fingerprints." They retraced the movements of each guest. Poirot asked Lady Cecilia to stand where she had been, to turn as she had done that evening, and to repeat her toast. The flickering candlelight cast dancing reflections upon the mirror. In one corner of the glass, for just an instant, Hastings thought he saw a pale blue glint, then it vanished. He blinked. "I say, Poirot, did you see that?" Poirot nodded. "Indeed. A reflection where there should be none. You see, Hastings, the eye deceives itself with great enthusiasm." He moved a candle slightly to the left, and the blue glimmer returned, this time sharp and distinct. It looked almost like a jewel suspended in midair. Lady Cecilia gasped softly. "It's the sapphire!" Poirot smiled faintly. "No, madam, it is merely an illusion. A reflection of a blue vase from the sideboard, perhaps. But it shows us something vital, how easily one may believe one sees what is not truly there." He lifted the candle again, and the false sapphire melted into the mirror's depth. When the reconstruction was done, Poirot sent for the butler. "Mr. Lane, I should like to know who arranged the candles that night." "Miss Fenn, sir," the man replied after some thought. "She said it would make the jewel sparkle for her painting. I remember, because she asked for 2 more candlesticks from the dining room." "Ah," said Poirot softly. "Light for art, and perhaps also for concealment." As they left the drawing room, Hastings glanced back. The mirror, now dim and grey, seemed to hold the faintest ghost of blue light deep within its surface. He shivered. That afternoon, Poirot wandered alone through the house, his small figure moving noiselessly from room to room. Hastings, watching from the landing, marveled at how quietly he observed, pausing to study the angle of a window, the pattern of footsteps on the carpet, the arrangement of mirrors and lamps. When he finally returned, Poirot's shoes gleamed with dust. "I have found what I sought, Hastings." And what's that? Poirot held out his hand. Resting upon his palm was a tiny black flake, scarcely larger than a grain of pepper. Ash, he said softly. And not from a cigarette. Something delicate, silk, perhaps. Silk, repeated Hastings. What of it? Patience, mon ami. Silk burns cleanly, and quickly. Suppose a ribbon, perhaps, or a cord, were used in some small mechanism. When its purpose was served, it was destroyed. Such things are easily overlooked. Hastings frowned. A mechanism? Are you saying the sapphire was somehow lifted out of the case without opening it? Poirot smiled. Perhaps not lifted out, but replaced beforehand. The true question is not how the sapphire was taken, but when. They were interrupted by Lady Cecilia's maid, who brought a folded note. For you, Monsieur Poirot. It was found on the terrace. Poirot opened it. The handwriting was fine and nervous. If you value Lady Cecilia's peace, ask no more questions. The sapphire is cursed, let it rest. There are things better left unseen. Hastings stared. Good heavens! Who could have written that? Poirot folded the note carefully. It is written by someone afraid, but not of ghosts. Afraid of being discovered. He tapped the letter thoughtfully against his chin. A curious threat, Hastings, NSC par? Not cease your search or you will die, but ask no more questions. As though the danger lies in knowledge itself. He placed the note in his pocket. This, my friend, is a house of reflections. Every person here shows a surface, beautiful, calm, but beneath, there is distortion. Secrets warp the light. As evening fell, a soft drizzle began to whisper against the windows. Poirot stood before the empty glass case once more, his small figure reflected endlessly in the tall mirror. His voice, low and certain, broke the silence. The sapphire of Dusk has not vanished into thin air, Hastings. It is here, somewhere, hidden not by darkness, but by brilliance. The thief is clever, très clever. Yet even the cleverest forget one thing. What's that? Hastings asked. Poirot smiled, eyes glinting like polished stones. That Hercule Poirot has the patience to wait until the truth reflects itself. Outside, the last light of day died upon the wet lawns, and the house of Ravenshade seemed to sink deeper into its own secrets, while in Poirot's mind, the first shape of the solution began to gleam, faint and cold, like a sapphire glimpsed through mist. Chapter 4: The Studio of Shadows. The next morning broke cold and bright, the first sunlight in several days glinting across the rain-wet lawns. The clarity of the air seemed almost cruel against the lingering unease in the house. Servants moved about with nervous haste. Lady Cecilia, pale but composed, had announced that none was to leave the estate until the sapphire was recovered. Poirot, however, appeared entirely at ease. After breakfast, he stood at the window, gazing at the frost-tipped hedges as though the patterns might whisper secrets. Hastings, who had been attempting to make sense of the scribbled note left on the terrace, remarked, "You know, Poirot, if you ask me, that letter was nothing but a bit of melodrama. Probably written by some servant frightened of losing their position." Poirot smiled faintly. Hastings, always the simple answer for the complex problem. Yet crime, like art, requires composition, tone, contrast, mystery. Tell me, do you not find it curious that the note was written in violet ink? Hastings blinked. Violet ink? I hadn't noticed. Precisely, said Poirot. Few people use it. And I recall, in the drawing room, someone with a pen of that very colour. Hastings frowned. You mean Miss Fenn? Poirot inclined his head slightly. Justament. The artist who paints in blue and writes in violet, she interests me exceedingly. Miss Vivienne Fenn's studio occupied a small wing at the rear of Ravenshade Manor, overlooking the gardens. It was a curious place, high-ceilinged, with tall, north-facing windows and walls half-covered in faded tapestries. The air was faintly perfumed with turpentine, linseed oil, and the soft must of old velvet. Easels and canvases stood about in ordered chaos. Miss Fenn herself greeted them with her usual air of cool detachment. "You wish to see my work, Monsieur Poirot? Or to search my drawers, perhaps?" Poirot bowed slightly. "To observe, mademoiselle. Always, observation first." She laughed, a dry, brittle sound. "Then observe away. I've nothing to hide." Poirot wandered through the studio with delicate precision, his eyes taking in every brushstroke, every misplaced detail. There were landscapes, portraits, and one large unfinished painting draped with a sheet. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward it. "If you must," she said carelessly. He drew back the cloth, and Hastings gave a low whistle. The canvas depicted the drawing room of Ravenshade Manor, meticulously rendered. The sapphire gleamed within its case, painted with such lifelike radiance that one almost expected it to glow. Poirot's gaze sharpened. "A remarkable likeness. When did you paint this, mademoiselle?" "Over the past month. Lady Cecilia wished me to capture the spirit of the house, as she called it. The sapphire was to be the heart of it." Poirot bent closer. "And this reflection in the mirror, see, Hastings, the blue gleam, very faint, as though the jewel were doubled." Miss Fenn shrugged. "I painted what I saw. The mirror caught the light oddly that night." Poirot tapped his chin thoughtfully. "Indeed." The mirror again. He turned, his sharp eyes flitting toward a small stove in the corner. "You keep a fire here?" "Only for warmth," she said. "Oil paints dislike the cold." Poirot bent to look at the ashtray beside the stove. Among the grey remains of burnt rags lay a small fragment of charred ribbon, blackened but unmistakably silk. He lifted it with his tweezers, eyes glittering. "You are fond of blue, mademoiselle. Would this have been the same shade as your favorite dress?" Miss Fenn's expression did not change, but a slight color rose to her cheeks. "It was part of an old sash. I burned it weeks ago." "Mais oui," said Poirot softly. "Yet the ashes are new. The scent of sandalwood lingers, the same that clung to the lock of the glass case." For a moment, silence filled the studio. Then Miss Fenn gave a short laugh. "Really, Monsieur Poirot, you're seeing patterns where none exist. I liked scented candles. You're welcome to examine them." Poirot inclined his head politely. "I shall do so, with your permission." He inspected the candles, white wax, untouched, and nodded. "Curious. But we must never accuse where we cannot prove." When they had left the studio, Hastings could barely contain himself. "Poirot, do you actually believe she stole it? Burnt ribbon, sandalwood, it all fits, doesn't it?" Poirot smiled. Non, mon ami. It all fits too well. When clues arrange themselves with such neatness, they are seldom honest." He paused in the corridor, glancing at a tall, gilt-framed mirror that reflected the length of the hall. "You observe, Hastings, how these mirrors multiply the rooms. They double the light, and the lies. I begin to think our thief is one who understands reflections." Hastings frowned. "You mean?" "Perhaps I mean," said Poirot, "that one may hide something in plain sight, not by covering it, but by showing it twice." He would explain no further. That afternoon, Poirot requested to see Dr. Gray in the library. The physician arrived looking harassed, spectacles slightly askew, fingers stained with ink. "Doctor," said Poirot pleasantly, "you were the last to examine the glass case after the theft, yes?" Yes, said Gray shortly. I inspected it for tampering. None found. Did you notice an odor, faint, perhaps, of smoke? Gray frowned. I may have. But I attributed it to the candles. Poirot nodded. I thank you. And you have known Lady Cecilia for many years. Since her marriage. I was her husband's physician. Why? Poirot gave a small shrug. One must know the history of a household to understand its present troubles. Gray hesitated. Then perhaps you should know this, the sapphire was not merely an ornament. It was her late husband's gift, but also his obsession. He believed it cursed. Said it held the dusk of another world. When he died, she swore never to sell or display it again. Yet here we are. He paused, lowering his voice. Lady Cecilia is not well. The strain of his death, the loss of the stone, I fear for her heart. Poirot's expression softened. You are loyal, Doctor. Perhaps too loyal. Gray stiffened. Meaning what, precisely? Poirot merely smiled. Meaning that devotion sometimes blinds. Good day, Doctor. That evening, the household gathered for dinner, subdued and watchful. Poirot, at Lady Cecilia's right, observed each face in turn, the calm mask of Miss Fenn, the taut composure of Dr. Gray, the restless glances of Sir Giles. The atmosphere was charged, brittle, as if one wrong word might shatter it. When the meal ended, Lady Cecilia rose unsteadily. I cannot endure this suspense any longer, she said. Monsieur Poirot, will you tell us what you have discovered? Poirot folded his hands. Madam, I have discovered only that your sapphire was taken not for its value, but for its meaning. The thief risked much, too much, for mere gain. No, this is a crime of sentiment. Sir Giles gave a sharp laugh. Sentiment. You make it sound like a love affair. Perhaps, said Poirot quietly, it is. He looked toward Miss Fenn, whose hand trembled slightly on her glass, and then toward Dr. Gray, whose eyes were fixed on his plate. Tomorrow, Poirot said, rising, I shall ask you all to witness a small experiment. And when it is done, the sapphire of Dusk shall shine again either in its case, or upon a guilty conscience. That night, as the storm winds rose once more over Davenridge, Hastings found Poirot in his room, carefully polishing his silver-handled walking stick. Poirot, he said anxiously, you really believe you can find it tomorrow? Poirot smiled gently. My dear Hastings, it is already found. One must only arrange the light so that truth reveals itself. He placed the walking stick beside his bed, turned down the lamp, and murmured, in every mirror, Hastings, there is one reflection that tells no lie. Tomorrow, we shall see which face that is. Outside, lightning flickered over the moors, and in some secret corner of Davenridge Manor, something, or someone, stirred in the dark. Chapter 5, The Experiment at Davenridge. Morning came grey and heavy, clouds pressing low over the fields. The wind that swept through the chimneys carried a mournful sound, as though the house itself sighed under the weight of its secrets. By breakfast, the entire household buzzed with anticipation and dread. Poirot had announced an experiment, and the very word seemed to tighten every face at the table. Lady Cecilia sat at the head, composed but pale. Miss Fenn toyed with her spoon, eyes distant. Sir Giles smoked incessantly despite Lady Cecilia's protests, and Dr. Gray read the newspaper upside down. Only Poirot appeared entirely tranquil, eating his boiled egg with delicate precision. When Hastings could bear the silence no longer, he said, Poirot, might one ask what this experiment is about? Poirot dabbed his lips. An affair, mon ami, of mirrors and shadows. I shall require the cooperation of all, and a small measure of faith. Sir Giles gave a short laugh. Sounds like a conjuring trick. Poirot inclined his head. In a sense, Sir Giles, but my illusions are of the mind, not of the hand. By 10 o'clock, the household gathered in the drawing room, the same room where the sapphire had been stolen. The grey glass case stood empty at its centre, its velvet cushion bare. The air carried a faint, metallic chill. Poirot moved with quiet authority. "You will permit me," he said, "to restore this scene as it was on the night of the theft. Every lamp, every candle, placed exactly so." Servants hurried to obey, guided by Poirot's meticulous instructions. Curtains were drawn halfway, mirrors angled, the lights dimmed. It was uncanny how the room seemed to return to that very moment before disaster, a fragile piece before the shattering. Poirot stepped back, surveying the arrangement. "Excellent. Now, Hastings, will you stand by the mantelpiece, where Lady Cecilia stood?" "I did as I was told." "Dr. Gray, you will take your place near the window. Miss Fenn, by your easel. Sir Giles, the terrace door, if you please." Lady Cecilia, trembling slightly, asked, "And where shall I stand, Monsieur Poirot?" He smiled kindly. "In the centre, madam, by the empty case. It is your sapphire we honour." She nodded, clutching a lace handkerchief in one white hand. Poirot then drew the curtains fully, allowing a wash of dim autumn light to flood the room. "Now, observe," he said, gesturing toward the tall mirror opposite the case. This mirror, an innocent observer, yes? Yet on that night, it reflected something quite extraordinary. Sir Giles frowned. A reflection? What could that possibly prove? Poirot ignored him. "Miss Fenn, when you painted your scene, you captured a faint gleam, a second sapphire in the glass. You told me it was light, a trick of the angle. Mais non. It was a clue." He stepped closer, his eyes glinting. That second gleam was not the reflection of the jewel. It was the reflection of another case. A duplicate, hidden in plain sight. A murmur rippled through the room. "Another case?" Hastings repeated, bewildered. Poirot nodded. "Yes. A perfect imitation, same glass, same velvet. Constructed by one who had ample time and opportunity." Lady Cecilia swayed slightly. "But who?" "Patience, madam. The false case was placed here earlier that evening, the real one removed and hidden elsewhere. At the stroke of 9, when you drew the curtains and all eyes turned toward the sapphire, our thief opened the false case and pocketed the imitation stone already within. To every witness, it appeared that the sapphire had vanished. The confusion, the darkness, the thunder, all conspired to aid the illusion." Sir Giles snorted. "Ingenious, if true, but you have no proof." Poirot smiled. "I shall give you proof, Sir Giles. Hastings, kindly fetch the large mirror from the hall." With some difficulty, we carried it in and set it against the opposite wall. Poirot adjusted the angle carefully, until both mirrors faced each other. The effect was dizzying, the room multiplied infinitely, each reflection containing the empty case. Poirot stepped between them. "Voila! What do you see?" "Endless cases," Hastings said. "Like a tunnel of glass." "Exactly. A tunnel of deception. Now imagine, in this maze, a single object reversed, a clue invisible except to the one who placed it there." He reached into his pocket and drew out the small fragment of burned ribbon from Miss Fenn's studio. "This," he said softly, "was tied about the duplicate case, to distinguish it from the true one. When the exchange was complete, it was destroyed. But alas, the ashes, they tell no lies." Miss Fenn's composure cracked. "You can't mean—" "Ah, but I do not accuse you, mademoiselle," said Poirot gently. "You painted what you saw, and perhaps saw too much. The artist is often the mirror that truth fears most. Her lips parted, but she said nothing. Poirot turned to Lady Cecilia. Madam, when your late husband purchased the sapphire, he also had a copy made, a perfect facsimile, used for insurance. Did you know this? She shook her head, bewildered. No, never. It was locked in your husband's old study, forgotten. Someone discovered it recently and saw an opportunity. Sir Giles threw up his hands. So now it's me, is it? I'm the villain? Poirot's eyes softened. Not you. He looked toward the physician, who had been very still. Dr. Gray, Poirot said quietly, you attended Lady Cecilia daily, yes? You alone had access to every room, including the study. You alone could move freely through the house without suspicion. Gray's face went white. You're insane. Poirot's tone remained calm. Am I? The false case was built in your surgery, the faint smell of disinfectant lingered. And it was you who examined the real case after the theft, declaring it untampered. How convenient. You needed confusion, not clarity. Gray took a step backward. I did it for her sake, he burst out suddenly, voice raw. That stone was killing her, every day it reminded her of him, of that cursed marriage. I meant to destroy it, not steal it. But when I realized it was the copy, I panicked. I hid the real one in the conservatory, behind the fountain. I swear it. Lady Cecilia stared, horror and pity mingled. Oh, Henry, why? He dropped his gaze. Because I loved you, he whispered. And he never did. A silence followed, heavy as stone. Poirot bowed his head slightly. The heart, mon ami, is a dangerous thief. It steals reason long before it steals jewels. Later that day, the real sapphire was found exactly where Gray had said, hidden in a hollow behind the marble fountain. The duplicate case lay beside it, its ribbon burned away. Dr. Gray did not resist when the constable arrived, he simply asked that Lady Cecilia forgive him. She, trembling, promised she would try. That evening, the storm cleared, and the last light of sunset poured through the windows, soft, amber, almost forgiving. Hastings, gazing at the horizon, said quietly, you know, Poirot, for all his crime, I can't help feeling sorry for the man. Poirot nodded. Yes, Hastings. The tragedy of love is that it can make a thief of the honest, and a fool of the wise. He turned to the now restored sapphire, gleaming once more in its case. But look, mon ami, see how it catches the dusk. The same fire as before, yet tamed. It reminds us that even darkness, properly understood, may become beautiful. He straightened his cuffs, perfectly serene. The case, he murmured, is closed. Chapter 6, A Glimmer in the Ashes. The storm had passed. Morning sunlight spread across Davenridge Manor, washing the walls in pale gold. The ordeal of the previous day seemed, at last, to have lifted. Servants moved quietly, whispering the name of Dr. Gray as if speaking too loudly might summon him back from disgrace. Poirot, ever punctual, took breakfast in the conservatory, the very place where the sapphire had been found. He sat amid ferns and orchids, sipping chocolate from a delicate cup. Hastings joined him, looking both relieved and subdued. Well, Poirot, he said, sitting down heavily, I must say, you've done it again. Another case neatly solved. I suppose Scotland Yard will take the doctor away today. Poirot inclined his head. My friend. Justice, it seems, is satisfied. Hastings hesitated. You sound almost disappointed. Poirot smiled faintly. Ah, Hastings, you have learned to hear the small dissonances in my harmony. No, not disappointment, merely reflection. There are elements, as always, that do not quite fit. Hastings frowned. But he confessed. What more could there be? Confession, mon ami, is a curious thing. Sometimes it reveals truth, sometimes it hides it. He set down his cup. Dr. Gray confessed to love, to pity, to a noble folly. But theft? The act itself, deliberate, deceitful, I find it unlike him. Too crude, too theatrical. Hastings blinked. You think he's innocent? Poirot lifted one finger. Not innocent. But perhaps not alone. Later that morning, Poirot asked to see Lady Cecilia in her private sitting room. She was dressed in morning grey, her usual poise slightly frayed. A silver teapot steamed beside her, untouched. Dr. Gray is to be taken away, she said quietly. It feels so strange. He has been with us since my husband's illness. I never imagined he could do such a thing. Poirot studied her face. You have forgiven him. She nodded faintly. I think he believed he was sparing me. He was wrong, but his heart was kind. Poirot's gaze wandered to the mantelpiece, where a small portrait of the late Lord Davenridge hung, a man with cold eyes and a faint, mocking smile. Your husband, madam, he valued the sapphire above all, yes? Her lips tightened. He said it was eternal dusk captured in stone. He was obsessed. It was his symbol of power, his control. Poirot's voice softened. Then perhaps, to destroy it would have been a liberation. She looked at him sharply. You think Henry meant to destroy it after all? I think, said Poirot, that someone meant for him to believe that was his wish. She frowned, puzzled, but before she could reply, there came a knock. A footman entered, pale and uneasy. Beg pardon, milady. There's something odd. In the library. Poirot rose at once. Ah. Always the library, the mind of the house. The library was cool and dim, the air heavy with the scent of old leather. Upon the great desk lay a heap of grey ash, faintly glittering. Poirot bent close. Ashes again. But not of paper. This, he touched the residue delicately, is from velvet. Blue velvet. Lady Cecilia gasped. From the sapphire's case. Perhaps from another, said Poirot. Do you observe, Hastings, the faint glint? Like powdered glass. Hastings peered closer. Yes, tiny shards. Poirot nodded slowly. Mon Dieu. So the fire that destroyed this was not of anger, but of concealment. He turned to the footman. Who discovered this? Miss Fenn, sir. She went to fetch her sketchbook and found it like this. Where is she now? In the garden, sir. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Then let us join her. They found Miss Vivienne Fenn standing by the ornamental pond, her dark coat fluttering in the breeze. She turned as they approached, her expression unreadable. So it's not over, she said simply. Poirot smiled politely. No mystery ever truly ends, mademoiselle, until every light is extinguished. You found the ashes? Yes, she said. I came for a book I'd left in the library. The window was open, a draught stirring the papers. I saw the heap and called the servant. Curious, murmured Poirot. You paint from life, I think. Always. Then perhaps, he said softly, you might help me recreate the life of this scene. What did you see, exactly, before the ashes? She hesitated. Nothing. Only the smoke. Though, she paused. The air smelled of sandalwood again. Poirot's brows lifted. Ah. The scent that lingers through our tale like a refrain. She met his gaze. I told you, I burn candles. Yes, he said gently, but only white ones. Yet the ash in the library was dark blue. Her hands tightened on her gloves. Are you accusing me again, Monsieur Poirot? He shook his head. I accuse no one, yet. But as she turned away, Hastings caught the faint shimmer of something in her pocket, a glint of deep blue, like a sliver of the sea at twilight. That evening, the mood at Ravenshade was tense once more. Dr. Gray, under escort, was to depart in the morning. Poirot spent hours in the drawing room, measuring distances, studying reflections, muttering softly in French. When Hastings finally confronted him, Poirot merely smiled. Patience, mon ami. This house, it still whispers. At 10:30, there came a sound, a faint click from the corridor. Poirot's head turned sharply. Ah! The whisper grows louder. They followed the sound to the locked door of the late Lord Ravenshade study, the room long sealed after his death. Poirot, with Lady Cecilia's permission, opened it. The air was stale, thick with dust and the scent of age. The room was dominated by a heavy desk, an oil portrait above it, and shelves of leather-bound volumes. In one corner stood a small safe, its door ajar. Poirot approached it carefully. Inside lay fragments of blue glass, shards, delicate and glittering. The imitation sapphire, he murmured. But broken deliberately. Hastings swallowed. Then Gray was telling the truth, he took the copy. "OUI," said Poirot softly. But someone wished to destroy the evidence of that truth. And who would have access to this locked room? Lady Cecilia's voice trembled behind them. "Only I, and my niece, Miss Fenn. I gave her permission once, months ago, to sketch in here." Poirot turned slowly. Then perhaps she sketched more than furniture. He lifted a sheet of old paper from the desk, a sketch of the late Lord Ravenshade, unmistakably drawn by Miss Fenn. But behind the portrait, faint pencil outline showed another drawing, an exact replica of the sapphire's case, measurements and all. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Tiens. The duplicate's design. She built it, not Gray. Lady Cecilia gasped. Vivienne? Poirot bowed slightly. "OUI, madam. The artist who paints illusions and lives among mirrors." Moments later, footsteps echoed in the corridor. Poirot turned. Miss Fenn stood in the doorway, pale and defiant. "So it's to be me again, is it?" she said coldly. "How neat. The artist as the deceiver." Poirot's voice was quiet. "Neat, yes, but not simple. You did not steal for greed. You did it for justice. For the truth your uncle denied you." Her lips parted. "You know. Your mother," Poirot said softly, "was Lady Cecilia's elder sister, disinherited by Lord Ravenshade for marrying an artist. You grew up poor, unseen, yet here you were, painting the house that should have been yours by right. The sapphire was your symbol of that injustice. You planned to exchange it, the real for the false, not to sell it, but to prove your power. When Dr. Gray intervened, you let him take the blame." Vivienne's eyes flashed. "He would have destroyed it." "I only meant to own it, for a moment." Poirot nodded. "And in that moment, you lost far more." She sank into a chair, trembling. "I never meant for it to go so far." Poirot's tone softened. "Few ever do, mademoiselle." Outside, dawn began to pale the sky once more, casting light upon the broken glass in the safe. It glittered faintly, the last reflection of the lies that had haunted Ravenshade. Poirot folded his hands. "Now," he said gently, "the sapphire may rest. Its dusk is ended." Chapter 7, The Mirror and the Mask. Morning came heavy with mist, curling like smoke around the tall chimneys of Ravenshade Hall. The house had fallen into a hush, broken only by the echo of footsteps in the long corridors. The discovery of the servant girl's body had left everyone shaken. Even Hastings admitted over breakfast that he had never seen such cold-blooded wickedness. Poirot, however, was unusually quiet. He sipped his chocolate thoughtfully, eyes unfocused, as if gazing into the distance of his own mind. His small, elegant hands were folded neatly before him, fingers tapping lightly, a sure sign his famous little grey cells were hard at work. At last he spoke. "Hastings, my friend, I believe the moment has come to look again, not at what we see, but at what we are meant to see." "I don't follow you," said Hastings, buttering his toast distractedly. "Exactly." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "None of us have followed the true path, because our minds were guided, too neatly, by a design. Someone here is a master of illusion. An illusionist." Hastings frowned. "You mean the theft and the murder are staged somehow?" "Perhaps not staged," said Poirot slowly, "but arranged with the precision of an artist. The rope that strangled poor Julian Ravenshade was silk, elegant, unnecessary. The theft of the diamond was theatrical, not practical. And last night's killing of the maid, that was not desperation. That was calculation." Lady Helena entered the breakfast room just then, pale and trembling but beautifully dressed, as though dignity were her last defense. "Monsieur Poirot," she said softly, "I cannot bear it much longer. My house feels cursed. I beg of you, end this nightmare." Poirot stood, bowing slightly. "You have my word, madam. Before another night falls, we shall lift the veil that has darkened Ravenshade." Later that morning, Poirot gathered everyone in the drawing room. The mist outside had thickened to a ghostly pall, blurring the gardens beyond the great windows. The fire burned low, casting wavering shadows over faces already strained by fear. There was Lady Helena, pale and fragile, clutching a lace handkerchief. Dr. Marbury, watchful and weary. Clara Wren, her eye swollen from crying, yet with something fierce in her expression. And of course, Inspector Grange, who stood apart, notebook in hand, impatient with Poirot's deliberate pace. "My friends," Poirot began, "we have searched this house for the missing Ravenshade diamond, and we have found instead tragedy, deceit, and death. But before we can speak of justice, we must look upon truth, the real face beneath the mask." "Spare us the riddles, Poirot," grumbled Grange. "We've all had quite enough mystery." Poirot inclined his head slightly. "Ah, but it is the mystery that explains the crime, mon ami. Consider, the theft was discovered within moments of Lady Helena showing the diamond to her guests. The case was found broken, the jewel gone, and poor Julian accused by implication." "Yes," said Lady Helena faintly. "We thought perhaps he had taken it, that dreadful quarrel with me." "But you were wrong," Poirot said. "Julian Ravenshade was no thief. He was, I believe, the intended victim from the very start." Clara gasped. "Victim? But he was killed later, after the theft." Poirot smiled gently. "Exactly, mademoiselle. The theft was the bait. The true purpose was murder." He began to walk slowly around the room, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes darting from one face to another. "The murderer is one who understood psychology, who knew how pride and suspicion could turn a household against itself. By making it appear that Julian stole the diamond, our criminal isolated him. The others watched him, distrusted him, left him alone. And then, when he was most vulnerable, he was strangled." "But who?" said Hastings. "Everyone here had reason to resent him in some way." "Yes," said Poirot softly, "but only one had the opportunity to arrange such a performance." He paused before the great mirror above the mantelpiece. "I have often found, Hastings, that mirrors tell the truth even when people do not. The others followed his gaze uncertainly. Poirot leaned closer to the mirror. "Last night, I examined this carefully. There is a small scratch, recent, at the lower corner of the frame. And on the carpet just below it, a few crystals of glass dust. Curious, n'est-ce pas?" Grange frowned. "A scratch? What of it?" "It means," said Poirot, "that this mirror was moved. And when one moves a mirror in a room such as this, one alters the perspective. What if, on the night of the theft, someone had rearranged the angle of this mirror, just slightly, so that a reflection misled the eye? So that, when Lady Helena turned, she saw not the real thief, but the reflection of another person altogether." There was a collective murmur of surprise. Poirot went on, his voice growing quieter, more intense. "Suppose, too, that this person, the true thief, knew that Julian would be blamed, that his temper would flare, that all eyes would turn upon him. Suppose that same person later returned the diamond to its hiding place, but murdered Julian to silence him and the maid, poor creature, because she saw something she should not." Clara stood up, trembling. "Are you saying, someone in this room?" "Oh, mademoiselle." Poirot turned sharply. "The murderer is in this room now." Silence fell. Only the crackle of the fire broke it. Poirot allowed the moment to stretch until even Hastings shifted uneasily. "Dr. Marbury," Poirot said suddenly, "you have been the calm observer throughout." "Too calm, perhaps. You knew of Lady Helena's tonic, of Julian's habits, of every door and corridor in this house. You told us the maid was loyal, because you knew she would not speak. You gave us truth wrapped in deceit." Marbury's face went grey. "You can't." "Ah, but I can," interrupted Poirot, his voice sharp now. "You see, I found a trace of chloral in Lady Helena's glass. A sedative, mixed by your own hand. The good lady was meant to sleep deeply that night, yes? And while she slept, the theft was enacted. A theft that never truly happened." Lady Helena clutched her throat. "The diamond, never gone." "Hidden only," said Poirot. "In the hollow of the clock by the staircase. A perfect diversion, while you, Doctor, removed your rival from your path. You wished to inherit not jewels, but influence, to bind Lady Helena to you in her grief, her dependence." For a moment, no one moved. Then Marbury gave a strangled laugh. "You clever little devil. You can't prove a thing." Poirot's eyes glittered. "On the contrary, I can prove everything." He held up a folded paper. The maid's note, found beneath her pillow. She wrote only 3 words before she died: "The mirror moved." Dr. Marbury's composure broke. With a cry, he lunged for the fire, but Grange was quicker. 2 constables who had been waiting outside rushed in, and in moments, the doctor was restrained. Poirot adjusted his cuffs delicately. A man who plays with mirrors, Hastings, should beware of seeing himself too clearly. Hastings exhaled in awe. So that's it, then, the theft, the murders, all part of one devilish plan. Poirot nodded gravely. "And yet, my friend, it was undone not by strength or science, but by one small detail, a mirror scratch." He turned to Lady Helena and bowed. "Madam, Ravenshade is free of its shadow. But I fear it shall never quite be the same." Lady Helena, eyes brimming, whispered, "You have brought back the truth, Monsieur Poirot. That is more than any diamond." Poirot smiled faintly. "Truth, madam, is the most precious jewel of all." Chapter 8, The Final Revelation. The afternoon sun broke weakly through the grey skies above Ravenshade Hall, casting pale light upon the lawn still glistening from the morning's mist. Inside, the atmosphere was quieter, not peaceful, but subdued. The house had endured too much in too short a time. Whispers drifted through the halls as servants gathered in small clusters, speaking in hushed tones of the night's dramatic arrest. In the drawing room, Poirot stood near the tall window, gazing thoughtfully at the gardens beyond. His hands were clasped neatly behind his back, and his eyes reflected that curious stillness he so often displayed when his work was complete, the calm after the storm. Hastings entered, a look of relief mingled with lingering confusion on his face. "It's all over, then," he said, with a weary sigh. "Marbury's confessed to everything. He's to be taken to London for trial tomorrow. But I can't help feeling there's something we still don't know. Something unfinished." Poirot smiled faintly. "You are observant today, mon ami." Indeed, the doctor confessed, but not to everything. There remained still the small details, the little grey cell's dessert, if you will. "Dessert?" Hastings echoed incredulously. "Good heavens, Poirot, after all that's happened, I should think you'd lost your appetite for anything." Poirot chuckled softly. "On the contrary, Hastings. The truth, like a fine meal, must be savoured to the last morsel." Not long after, Lady Helena joined them. She looked older somehow, her elegance tinged with sorrow, though she carried herself with dignity. "Inspector Grange tells me it was you, Monsieur Poirot, who found the diamond." Poirot inclined his head. "Oh, madam." It was hidden most ingeniously, in the hollow of the clock, wrapped in a handkerchief soaked with oil to prevent the ticking from betraying its presence. "A clever touch, non?" She nodded weakly. "I cannot bear to look upon it again. That stone has brought nothing but grief." Poirot regarded her quietly. "Perhaps, madam, it was not the stone that brought grief, but the greed that clung to it. Objects, you see, are innocent. It is men, and sometimes women, who make them wicked." Lady Helena lowered her eyes. "And to think I trusted Dr. Marbury implicitly. He was my husband's friend. He tended Julian since childhood. I cannot comprehend such deceit." "Ah," said Poirot softly, "but deceit often wears the face of loyalty. Dr. Marbury was not a man driven by passion or hatred. His crime was colder, born of vanity and pride. He saw himself as the saviour of this house, its guiding intellect. And when others failed to recognize it, he determined to force their dependence." She looked at him sharply. "You mean, he wished to control me?" Poirot nodded. "Yes. To become indispensable. To rule through sympathy and sorrow. He would have comforted you, advised you, perhaps even inherited through gratitude. It is the oldest motive in the world, madam, power disguised as devotion." For a long moment, Lady Helena said nothing. Then she whispered, "You have restored my sight, Monsieur Poirot, though I fear I shall never see the world quite the same again." Poirot bowed slightly. "Disillusionment, madam, though bitter, is sometimes the beginning of wisdom." That evening, as the sun dipped behind the oaks, Poirot and Hastings took a walk along the gravel path leading toward the lake. The air was cool and fragrant with damp earth. "I must say, Poirot," Hastings began, "it was a deuced clever plan. But I'm still puzzled about the maid. How did she know enough to write that note about the mirror?" Poirot smiled. "It was simple, mon ami. On the night of the theft, she entered the drawing room to close the curtains. She saw the doctor adjusting the mirror. She thought nothing of it until later, when she overheard us discussing how the reflections had confused the witnesses. Then she realized what it meant. The poor child paid for her observation with her life." "Beastly business," muttered Hastings. "And yet, you never seemed entirely surprised." "Because," said Poirot, "there was one thing that troubled me from the start, the manner of Julian's death. It was too careful, too precise. Not a struggle, no disorder, no haste. That was not the work of a desperate thief, but of a mind rehearsed in control. Marbury's hands, the hands of a doctor, knew exactly how much pressure to apply, how to silence a man without a cry. It was the signature of his profession. Hastings shivered. "You're right. When you put it that way, it's all frightfully clear." Poirot stopped by the edge of the lake, where reeds whispered in the wind. The water reflected the dimming light like tarnished silver. "You see, Hastings, every crime is like a painting. The brushstrokes, the colors, the composition, they tell a story. But one must stand back to see the whole picture. When you are too close, you see only the lines." He turned to his friend with a small smile. "That is why, in the end, the mirror gave us the truth. It was both the instrument of deceit and the clue to reality. A fitting symbol, NSCE par." "Symbol," said Hastings, puzzled. Poirot spread his hands. "The mirror, my dear Hastings, is like the human conscience. It shows what is there, but only if one dares to look." Later that night, Poirot retired to the small study that had been lent to him. A fire glowed softly, and his suitcase lay open on the desk, half-packed. He took from his pocket a small velvet box, the Ravenshade diamond. It gleamed faintly in the firelight, its inner fire pure and cold. He turned it thoughtfully in his fingers. "You, mon cher diamond," he murmured, "have caused much sorrow. And yet, you are innocent. How strange that men should kill for the glitter of a stone." There came a knock at the door. Lady Helena entered, her face calm but weary. "I wanted to thank you again, Monsieur Poirot. You have brought peace back to my house, if not happiness." Poirot rose and bowed. "Peace, madam, is the seed from which happiness may yet grow. And may I say, it has been my honor to serve you." She looked at the diamond in his hand. "It should not remain here. It belongs in the past, with my husband, with all that has been lost." Poirot nodded. "You are wise. Send it to the museum, perhaps, where it may lie behind glass, admired, but never again desired." Lady Helena smiled faintly. "Yes. That is what I shall do." She paused at the door, then turned back. "Monsieur Poirot, how did you know?" "From the very start." Poirot's eyes twinkled. "Because, madam, when I met Dr. Marbury, I saw at once that his moustache was too perfect." Her brow furrowed. "His moustache. Mais oui." Poirot's eyes danced with amusement. A man who devotes such care to the symmetry of his appearance is often one who cannot bear disorder, even in life. Such a man, when fate denies him control, will create it through crime. Lady Helena gave a soft laugh despite herself. Then perhaps it was his vanity that betrayed him after all. "Always, madam," Poirot said gently. "Always." When she had gone, Poirot placed the diamond back into its velvet box and closed it with a decisive click. He stood a moment longer before the fire, then turned out the lamp. Outside, the mist had lifted, and the moonlight silvered the grounds of Ravenshade Hall. The house stood silent now, its ghosts at last laid to rest. Poirot paused at the door, adjusting his tie, and murmured to himself, "Order has been restored. And once again, the little grey cells have triumphed." He smiled, took up his hat and cane, and stepped quietly into the night.